Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know we're tired. You came from work. We came from RightsCon. It was a whole day thing. I know we're drained. Thank you for being here. Repro Uncensored was actually founded 2 years ago. I was thought through 2 years ago at RightsCon. And the idea was to be able to fight suppression of information on reproductive health or abortion access and fight big tech. And find alternative ways to get information out, as well as put pressure as much as possible to big tech to get accurate information out. As you know, information suppression is a reality not only in the US and Europe, but everywhere in the world. And we're trying to find alternative ways to work by doing advocacy work, partnering with local organizations, supporting them in whatever ways that we can, education, as much as possible.
I'd like to pass the mic to every panelist to just quickly state your name, your organization, what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Martha. I co-founded with Jane Repro Uncensored, and I'm also a digital strategist for a bunch of reproductive health and abortion access organizations, including Plan C in the US, Women on Web throughout the world, Hesperian Health Guides, and many other ones. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Surabhi. I work with R&W Media. We are an international media development organization based out of the Netherlands. And I work as media innovation lead. But also before that, I worked on abortion rights in India for several years and on comprehensive sexuality education globally.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rhian. My pronouns are they, them. I work at ShareNet International, which is a sexual and reproductive health and rights network in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but we are a global organization. I'm also an SRHR advisor. SRHR is Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. I will use that abbreviation quite a lot. So yeah, I'm an SRHR advisor at the KIT Institute.
I'm Kate Bertash. I'm the executive director at the Digital Defense Fund. We're an organization that does digital security support and privacy and technology resources for US-based movements across bodily autonomy, digital autonomy, and many other kinds of areas of liberation. Otherwise, from the Pacific Northwest in the United States, and I'm really happy to be with y'all tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kath. I am the communications manager at Women First Digital. So Women First Digital is a US-based platform where we work mostly on promoting access to abortion, abortion care, as well as abortion information. While we are based in the US, our team is actually remote, so we're from everywhere around the world, which is fun when it comes to converting time zones for meeting. And also, our abortion counselors, they provide consultation to people around the world. So they speak 10 different languages. Not one person speaks 10 different languages. We have a bunch of people. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jane Eklund. As my colleague Martha said, I'm the co-founder of Repro Uncensored. I lead our research for the collective, and it is a group of reproductive rights activists, digital rights advocates, and creatives who all work with a common goal to fight the suppression of reproductive health and rights information online.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rita, and also to Kim. I go by different names in different places because I do many different things, but I am an educator. I teach global health at National Taiwan University, and I am also an activist. I mostly do work in LGBTQ rights. You can see from my scarf and from my earring. So, just so you know, so that's what I do most of the time. And I am a woman, and I'm a queer person myself. And then Zoe and I have a podcast that is produced by Go Silent Media. Thank you for that. And we're both from Green Party Taiwan, failed politician, ran for parliament twice. That didn't happen, so we have actual legislators here that we look up to.
I'm Zoe. I'm also a podcast host with Kim, and I have another show called In the Weeds, talking about cannabis in Taiwan. So my day job is a cannabis lawyer in Taiwan.
A few things. With Repro Uncensored, we built a function that says report an incident, where people can report if actually they've been censored online, whether, as organizations or as individuals. And just in the last few weeks, we've seen like an increase of reports happening. It's not new. It's been happening for years, but with the elections in the US, with the fall of Roe v. Wade, we can see how this has been a rippling effect throughout the world. What I do is try to get either information out on how people can access abortion care in the US or worldwide by actually providing the service or information, And we see with, for example, Women on Web, that whenever a website is being blocked, we see a decrease of like 30 to 40% of consultations right away. So this is not, just like, making sure that people know. It's actually care that people cannot get. And it's happening all the time. Our website in South Korea, for example, has been blocked for four times. We just made another website. It might get blocked again. We're going to have to build another website. And it's just constant. We're small organizations. We don't have that much funding. And it takes so much time and resources to just keep fighting against big tech. So that's my frustration, and it's something that is ongoing, and we see it from organizations worldwide. And we are here, and we're able to report on this, but there are many organizations around the world that don't have the resources or not even aware that this is happening to them. And, they try to get the word out, and they can. So,
so as a media development organization, we have two core areas we look at, which is first, how do we work with media makers? So not just traditional journalists, but also content creators, influencers, citizen journalists, to talk about issues that matter to them and to their communities. And the second is, how do we enable access to fact-based, accurate, rights-based information on several issues, including on comprehensive sexuality education and, of course, abortion rights. And I think both of these are in grave challenge at the moment. If you know, independent and public interest media is in grave danger because of funding cuts and the fact that there is no truth out there anymore. And so independent journalists and media organizations are really struggling to get the truth out and really challenge opposition and governments who are fighting truth. And I think for enabling access to information, we have worked for several years with partners around the world globally on working on advancing SRHR education, right? And this means working with content creators, young influencers, sexuality educators who want to talk about SRHR issues in their communities from India to Mexico, and really have a space to talk about issues that enable young people to talk about their sexual well-being, pleasure, sexual health, reproductive rights. And again, because of what's happening in online spaces, owing to disinformation, censorship, that civic space is also shrinking. So we are not just seeing stuff happening in offline world, but also very much in online spaces. And with the recent changes made by social media platforms, especially on content moderation, rejection of ads, we are seeing this constant censorship transferring from offline to online spaces. And it's just aggravating every day. So those are some of the challenges we are facing in terms of not just in Europe, but more globally.
So ShareNet International is a member network, and we have 3,500 members in more than 90 countries around the world. And everyone in our network is working in SRHR in some aspect. So that can be anything in the SRHR spectrum. So we do have a lot of people working on abortion topics, comprehensive sexuality education, but any kind of SRHR topic that you can imagine as well. So at ShareNet, we do a lot of member convening, knowledge translation, knowledge generation. Until recently, we did also give out grants for our members to do work on traditionally unfunded SRHR topics, or things that are traditionally hard to get funded. But sadly, we've had our own funding cuts, so we can't give out grants anymore. And we are also unsure about the future of ShareNet, so let's see what happens. But yeah, one of the major activities we do is communities of practice on different SRHR topics as well. So we have about 35 communities of practice. Some are local, some are international. And actually the reason I'm here in Taipei for RightsCon is because I facilitate the digital rights community of practice for SRHR information, which was also formed after the last RightsCon and meeting so many people working in this space who kind of didn't have a space to meet and talk to other people working on these topics.
Again, I'm with Digital Defense Fund, which was established in 2016 after Donald Trump was elected the first time. There had been a bunch of high-profile sort of attacks on organizations that help people to actually get their abortions in the United States. And so there was a sort of established need for more digital security resources, attacks on websites, attacks on the identities of people who do abortions. And then, of course, there's all the infrastructure that in the United States, we have something called abortion funds. I know they exist globally, but indeed, they also exist in the US, thank goodness, that help people to actually pay for their procedures. So in addition to then having people who do the abortions, there's people who help you get to the abortion. And there's just this tremendous amount of information that needs to be collected. People have to come and find you somewhere on the internet and then give you a lot of very sensitive information. So this was kind of a really rough environment to exist in, where it's also not only just under political attack and ideological attack, but also garden variety financial scams, I think, which everybody in this room has had experience with. And so when we went out there, I think we thought this was going to be a very different job. So I figured, okay, we'll go from organization to organization and we'll see what they need. Do they need platforms that have better encrypted communications? Do they need secure forms where people can do intake? Do we need to learn how to use two-factor and all kinds of other great tools? And while all that indeed was very true, something kind of more, I think kind of like a deeper current that carries through a lot of both RightsCon and then of course through this panel had emerged, which is that when you are in this space where there's a lot of best practices for digital security, sometimes the urge that you get or the sense you get from even fellow practitioners is that it's our job to kind of like close up and to hide and to kind of censor ourselves even off the internet. So there's not just these big platforms which push us off, but there's this like threat space that makes us feel the kind of fear and stigma and criminalization that makes you want to kind of like go offline. But the internet is where the world is. And the you that exists in your devices is the part of you that touches the widest part of the world on a day-to-day basis. And so I think I didn't predict the extent to which doing the work with organizations in this way would actually kind of reveal to me that like bodily autonomy and digital autonomy are linked. You cannot have one without the other. And it is our right to like take up space online and to take up space in our wider world and to use the internet and safe tools for common sense, everyday needs like getting an abortion, as well as everything else we do, accessing democracy, to find community, to be ourselves. It's been amazing because Digital Defense Fund has been able to sort of grow from an organization that helps people. Of course, we still help folks to find the technology that meets their everyday needs for the work that they do in their communities, but also to kind of be part of the social change that says it is our right to occupy this space, this world, and to live in it together, offline, online, everywhere.
Okay, I was the only one clapping. Anyway, I thought that was beautiful. And I love what you said about taking up space, because I feel like as women, we are taught since we're young to not take up space, to be as small as possible, even the beauty standard, to be small, to be petite. And it translates to the online space as well, where we don't have the space, to safe space to occupy, to talk about things. And this is why it's so important to have a community, because not only do we get to take up space in real life, but also to take up space in the digital world as well. Women First Digital is, like I said, an e-health platform. So it's like an umbrella of two different platforms. We have Safe to Choose, which is a website where people can go and ask and find information about how to take abortion pills, like with the protocols of MISO and MIFE, or MISO only, things like that. And we also have the counselors who, like I said, speak 10 different languages where you can talk to them. And then we have the other website, which is called How to Use Abortion Pill. Can you guess what it's about? It's such a mystery, right? So it's about how to use abortion pill. So we have Ali, which is the chatbot where you can talk to her on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on all the media platforms, as well as on the website as well. And we also have an e-learning course where providers or anyone who's interested can take the course and learn about abortion. And then you get a pretty certificate at the end.
So as my colleague Martha stated, Repro Uncensored really started about 2 years ago at RightsCon 2023. And that is also around the time when I started researching the intersection of reproductive health and rights and the internet and technology and social media. I've learned a lot in that period of time. I was previously working with Amnesty International on their tech team for the past year and a half. So doing in-depth research, tracking legislation in the United States that would ban access to websites with reproductive health and rights information, such as Plan C. There have been bills introduced that explicitly, say that people wouldn't be able to access Plan C if they were passed. And Plan C isn't even an abortion provider. They just share information on how to access abortion pills. So it really shows how there are anti-abortion legislators in the United States who really just want to make sure people can't even learn about reproductive rights. They can't even learn concern about how to safely access abortion if they're living in a restrictive state. So that is, really the difficult environment that many people find themselves in the United States. There are many states that completely restrict abortion access. This concerning trend that we've been seeing with legislation has been occurring at the same time as social media companies have been removing abortion information from social media platforms. So I would say that there was a major surge, a reported surge in this issue in 2022 when federal protections for abortion were stripped away by the Supreme Court. And ever since then, there have just been these waves of content being removed talking about how to access abortion. There have been a lot of accounts suspended by reproductive health and rights organizations, which limits their visibility online, which is a huge problem, right, when they're trying to share information on how to access safe care. It's also a means of verification for abortion providers. Abortion providers will use social media as a way for potential patients to make sure that they are like a legitimate clinic or a pill provider. So there are many different impacts that stem from, restricting the visibility of reproductive health and rights organizations online. And, working with, Plan C and many other organizations, I've been able to see that in real time, like when we are at events and Martha's like, oh, Plan C's account just got restricted again. Like that happened to us as we were talking to someone at Meta at a party. So it's just really interesting. And as she said, in January in the United States following or around the time of the presidential inauguration, we saw this big wave of repro rights accounts being taken down again. And, we're entering this new and I would say very concerning era in the United States where there is this extremely conservative anti-abortion government that is now becoming friends with the tech bro oligarchy that is forming, right? And that was very visible during the inauguration. Like all of a sudden we had all these heads of technology companies right behind Trump as he's being inaugurated. So, we're entering this new era, but, Repro Uncensored obviously is here to ensure that people can always access the information they need. And, we'll find creative ways to get that information out to people, and we'll keep tracking the trends of, how this content keeps being restricted.
So Zoe and I's jobs are to give a really brief overview of similar issues or, related topics in Taiwan. So Zoe will talk more about abortion, other side, which is the denied access to reproductive technology in Taiwan. So basically, I think it's the same logic behind banning abortion and banning people's access to reproductive technology. It's the same kind of logic that who is the gatekeeper of the law, right? I decide you can do this, you cannot do that. So right now in Taiwan, we have very advanced assisted reproductive technology in Taiwan. People from around the world actually travel to Taiwan to access that, but there are people in Taiwan who are denied access. These are same-sex couple and single women. So we're not allowed access to that. And it's the same kind of logic. So it's the government telling us, like, I decide who has the right to do what. There has been a fight to grant access of ART to different kinds of people, but that has dragged on for a very, very long time. So right now, our legislative house is a mess, okay? It's a mess. It's a disastrous mess. And the amendment bill to change the ART access law was on the table last year, but then right now, I don't think our legislative house has time to deal with that. So right now, there are still people who cannot access ART. Another thing is about, because most of the panelists here work on digital rights, right? Access to information, to correct accurate information about abortion, about sex education, things like that. So part of the things that I do as an LGBTQ activist is that with Hotline organization, I go into different classrooms to talk about gender education, talk about sex education, LGBT rights to students. We've been doing that for 20 years. But what we've observed in the past about 5 years is that there is the space has been decreasing, right? There are more opposition to us going into the school to talk to kids about that. We have been vilified that we're just trying to teach kids we're trying to convert them to gay, okay? You cannot be converted, you can be inspired. Yes, but but the opposition was so effective in their messaging that people really got scared that, oh, like if they see us, the gay people, they're gonna turn gay. Even my own sister asked me that question. I was like, oh, okay, where did that come from? But we know where that came from, right? That came from very well organized opposition that is mostly based in the conservative Christian churches. That is one very powerful group. There are definitely other groups. And another problem is that these groups, they would package themselves, they market themselves as very progressive, and they use very progressive names. But underneath, they are anti-abortion, they're anti-LGBT, anti-equality, but they're, again, very effective in their messaging. And people often fall for those, right, very pretty packaging. One problem that we see rising also in the past decade is that people have a false sense of achievement, right? Or we have reached gender equality because we have a female president, right? We have 41% of female legislators in the legislative house, right? That means we are equal. Same-sex couple can get married. We're equal. Everything is good. So people kind of become too relaxed, right? They're like, okay, we don't need to do anything. And they don't see the regression of rights. And that is actually happening in Taiwan. So I'm just gonna give you one statistics. Taiwan, very surprisingly, has the very high rate of maternal mortality rate. That is almost the highest of all countries of the same developmental stage, which is weird, right? We have the technology, we have the medical knowledge, we have all the tools to prevent that, but that is not prevented. So Taiwan right now has really high C-section rate, very high epidemiology rate. That's almost about 90%. So all women going through pregnancy in Taiwan get their little thing cut. You know where that is? Okay, just Google that later. I'm not gonna act that out, but very high MMR, that is maternal mortality rate, very high C-section, very high epidemiology, right? And then also higher infant mortality rate, right? Taiwan, we voted to have the best, healthcare system in the world, but a lot of things are actually lacking. But people's sense of false security, false achievement, kind of, not doing a good job in pushing our government in doing better in those aspects.
All right, that's talking about something illegal, but not really illegal. Okay, people probably heard about having abortion. It's our criminal law is not really legal in Taiwan, but anyone needs this kind of service, still accessible. Okay, in our criminal law, it says if a pregnant woman doing abortion, that person will facing 6 months jail time, under 6 months, or they got fined for 3,000 NTs, approximately $100. So the consequence is not that bad. But, well, it's not that bad, it's affordable quite, right? Think about it. Compared to you have a kid and you're a teenager. All right, but there's a lot of exceptions to make it legal. So if if you got raped, and of course you can do the abortion like legally 100%. And if that will jeopardize your health or your life, of course you could do that. But there's one tricky part. If you're a married woman, you have to agree, your partner have to agree with that. Well, if that person is not agree with it, you're not allowed to do the abortion. A birth control pill is easier, like Plan B. Well, by law, it says we need a prescription so that you could go to any pharmacy to get it. But actually, in practice, you could just walk into any pharmacy without any prescription. It could simply buy it. It violated the medical law. The pharmacy got caught. You got 3万块, like 30,000 new Taiwan dollar fine. So that would be $1,000 fine. Our kids could easily get the abortion pills, not even with prescriptions. Not even with prescription, it's around $200 for the whole therapy. That's the illegal part. If you decided to go to the clinic to do so, and it's still affordable, it's covered by health insurance. There's a clinic helping minors without their parents agree to do the abortion, or married women, they didn't get permission from their partners. The clinic still doing that. As one clinic in Taichung, and got the doctor got arrested because that doctor does this kind of service to more than 10 teenage girls without their parents' permission to do the abortion. And I think it's one very touching defense for himself, saying, if I don't help those girls, and they will go to some doctors without license, so I'm willing to commit a crime for those girls to give them brighter future, to give them a chance. And this doctor finds an 8-month jail time, but he didn't serve the jail time. Unfortunately, he passed away before the case got a final decision. But that's how Taiwan's situation, current situation.
At the end of the day, what we're all fighting against is control, right? Don't tell me what to do. I want it, I don't. You can do this, cannot, right? Where we might be fighting different in some part of the world, it's having abortion. Here, it's please, I want a kid, please. Create a law. Fix the law so that we can, right? Taiwan is, with many high-income societies as well, are witnessing high super age society. There's low birth rate. This is actually one really easy way to start fixing some of these numbers and to start changing people's lives. So next up, I would like to go around the world. I want to talk about more deeply. Let's go to Europe. Let's go to North America. I know we touched just a little bit on it, on some of the challenges. It's censorship, it's misinformation, it's right. And I believe that you also work with West Africa as well, and other parts of Asia, and then back to Taiwan. They've talked about the challenges that they're facing in each of these regions. Going forward, what are you collectively doing about it? How are you doing? I don't want to sound as if I'm putting the entire responsibility on you to say, how are you fixing this problem? but how is your organization? What does that advocacy look like? Martha, you work using design, you work using communications, and there's others here in the room. Stelina, we want to give a shout out to Stelina, who created the poster for tonight. And there's other writers and artists in the room as well, right? That is how you work, right? And there are others from academia. We have an online influencer who, that's just one of your amazing achievements. You know, everybody from a very, very different background, but how, going forward, what is that solution you're seeking, and how are you getting the rest of the world to get up to help you? Because we're here to also to create that alliance.
Let me answer that real quick. Well, I would just say that often a lot of the means of communication come from the same big capitals, right? Whether this is, Meta, Facebook, WhatsApp, and so on. So the ways that we get information out is often, coming from these very specific sources. So the idea is to obviously try to diversify as much as possible, using different platforms if possible. We try to support, for example, educational programs. We work on a program with Concordia University right now, maybe one with Columbia University for more ethical AIs in the future. So that's something that I think will be cool for the generations to come. I would say that a lot of organizations that, as we said before, don't sometimes have a seat at the table when it comes to these conversations with big tech. So trying to get like our partners from West Africa or, in other regions that maybe are not even aware that this is happening because they don't have the resources of the time, or just are just too geographically far away and it's very expensive to, come, I think is very important. And then just like you said, try to support as much as possible, creatives and other streams of getting the word out. We did a great project with some muralists in Miami recently, and, they have QR codes and people can get resources on information, how they can access abortion care in a state where it's extremely restrictive. So really trying to get other ways and empower creatives to get the word out is very important. We saw with Repro Uncensored that, for example, when people report an incident and we're able to connect them with press or really share this with our social media and other ways of communication, they were actually able to get their account back. This doesn't happen every single time, but it's been pretty successful, actually. So I think putting pressure on this, big tech, getting the word out through press is a really efficient way. So being able to work all together and knowing when these things are happening and putting pressure when we can is important. As we can talk about for hours, there is no real transparency or accountability from these platforms. So it's not like there is a very easy, streamlined way to get a hold of someone so we can get an answer on why this is happening. And often their answers actually don't make that much sense or are just different from one day to another. I mean, you know, it's very idealistic maybe, but being able to have maybe these specific, you know, different kind of centers that have these resources throughout the world and can share this with our communities and empower organizations on the ground is, I think, a very important goal. So, you know, whether it's Ghost Island Media or partners in West Africa or in Latin America, it's something that I hope we can keep doing. And you're right, I mean, the opposition often has a lot of funding. They're very, very good. They know exactly how to get, you don't even understand, sometimes you don't even know that it's the opposition, you know? Like, there are some websites that copy Plan C that are great. They're really amazing. They have so much money, they do such a good job. Or I don't know, there's so many nonprofits that are actually Christian-based that get so much money from Google. Well, as for example, Plan C is banned. We cannot run any ads on Google. It's been like this for 2 years now. So, yeah, I mean, if you know any funders, let us know. But but in the meantime, yeah, I think conversations are really important. Like, they're really important. Being able to come to this room. Also, RightsCon didn't have that many sessions actually that are about, you know, sexual and reproductive health. So being able to gather together in this room is fundamental, and I hope we can keep doing it.
Yeah, I think I would just add to what Martha was saying. From our perspective, we are doing, I think, 3 key things. And one is enabling media workers, not just in Europe, but globally, to talk about issues like abortion and do it in a fact-based, rights-based manner, and not just report on it, but also challenge and provide and offer counter-narratives, which are, not available in mainstream media at the moment. The second is, I think, gathering and collecting evidence. I heard yesterday at a session at RightsCon that documenting is so important in this moment. And if not useful for us in this time, but maybe for our future generations, documentation can make a lot of difference. So I think if we can gather evidence, collect evidence, and have that to show for future action, that's still very much an important force and energy we should put our mind to. And the last one, as Martha was saying, as RNW Media, we have partnered with, for example, ShareNet Kit to also occupy spaces that are not necessarily welcoming to SRHR abortion topics. So whether it's RightsCon, whether it's Mozilla Fest, which is a trustworthy AI conference, but we took SRHR there, and other, similar conferences, and even media spaces. I think there's a lot of need for intersectionality, and maybe we can learn from the right in that moment that, yeah, we want to come together, we want to be united, and regardless of what issue we are working on, there's always that common thread that unites us in terms of fighting control, freedom of expression, and all of that. So I think I would encourage you, whatever walk of life you're coming from, wherever you're working, engaging, even talking to your family about these issues, I think it can go a long way.
Yeah, so I was thinking earlier, we're based in the Netherlands. What issues do we have in the Netherlands? And also as an international, well, there are some. So as ShareNet is working internationally, we're kind of dealing with issues everywhere globally as well, right? So what I didn't mention before is we also have country hubs. So there's ShareNet Bangladesh, there's ShareNet Burundi, ShareNet Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Colombia, and ShareNet Jordan, as well as ShareNet Netherlands. In the Netherlands, there's ShareNet Netherlands and ShareNet International based there. So in every location, there's really different issues that we're facing. One of our members in the Netherlands is working on a project mapping CPCs. CPCs are crisis pregnancy centers or fake abortion clinics. Most people associate that with maybe the work you're doing in the US, the Repro Uncensored are doing, because there's a lot of CPCs in the US, which, have a bit more visibility. But actually, these are everywhere. So there's a lot in Europe as well. And so one of our members, Shake the Dust, started mapping the CPCs in Europe. So we have an open source map that you can see all of the pins of CPCs in Europe. This is something we're trying to develop a lot more to bring more visibility to this as an issue outside of the States. But it's also not just in Europe. It's also across the African continent. It's really everywhere globally. But there's just not so much visibility on crisis pregnancy centers. And as you're saying about design, they mimic real clinics. ShareNet Colombia, we have ShareNet Colombia, which is hosted by an organization called Pro Familia, which is the biggest reproductive health organization in Colombia. across the street from their office, there is a building in the same colors that looks exactly the same that is a crisis pregnancy center. So they're purposefully trying to mimic legitimate healthcare providers by using their branding, using their colors, luring people in under false pretenses. So yeah, that's a really horrible thing. But it's really real, and there's nothing to stop them doing that. Again, going to like a digital space and CPCs. If you want to put an advert on Google for CPCs, you can do that. Unless you're in the US, the UK, or Ireland, then you have to be a registered healthcare provider to actually put an advert about abortion-related care or services. But as the anti-rights kind of movement, the pro-life movement is so well funded, they can throw money at digital advertising forever. So it's quite likely if you are looking for abortion information online, you're going to search like, where do I get an abortion? What is an abortion? How do I get abortion pills? The first thing you see is quite likely to be an advert from a CPC, from pro-life movements, and there's nothing to stop that from happening. So, I mean, that's an issue that's, we look at in the digital rights community practice at ShareNet sometimes. Also like the disinformation around abortion information. Yeah, there's a lot. The internet is where 71% of 15 to 24-year-olds get information about sexuality education. There's a UNESCO study that was released last November about this. So, I mean, online information for sex ed, for SRHR, it's super important. And yeah, I mean, at ShareNet, we face censorship. We publish a lot of just SRHR resources. A lot of our hubs are restricted from like sharing information online about the work they're doing. So, for example, in ShareNet Jordan in 2023, there was a new cybercrime law that was released in Jordan that basically stops you from posting anything around SRHR, CSE, abortion, LGBTQ plus information. It's also illegal to post anything anonymously or use a VPN or a Tor or a proxy. So, if you are responsible for publishing information that could be misconstrued as pornography, and the law is like very loosely worded, so it's multiplayer interpretable. So pretty much anything around SRHR can be, kind of miscategorized as something that you cannot publish online, and you can get a really large fine or be sent to jail immediately for publishing that. So ShareNet we had grants. We were giving grants to our members, but ShareNet Jordan could not advertise our grants because the image we made to go with our grants was too explicit because it had a sex toy on it and because it had a tampon on it. So those images were too explicit to be published online in Jordan. So our Jordan branch said, actually, we can't publish this. Please make a new image because we could be prosecuted if we publish this post online. And I guess, as other people have mentioned, funding for SRHR work is really, really fragile right now. ShareNet has been funded by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the past 24 years. Our funding was just finished at the end of last year. What a lot of people don't know is that the Netherlands is one of the biggest SRHR funders globally, along with Sweden, Canada, I think, the US, and all of these places are shutting down SRHR funding. So now it's like super competitive to get funding to do this kind of work. And also with the global gag rule coming in, obviously like abortion is one of the first things to go in SRHR work. So also an issue.
And I'm actually going to pick it up right where you left off, where we talked about, you were discussing how Google search becomes a sort of ubiquitous experience. It's our front door to the whole internet. If I need to find sexual and reproductive health information, and very specifically, if I need to find an abortion, our sort of intuitive first thing we do is we go to Google and we look around. Where the rubber kind of meets the road, I really also appreciated our Taiwanese colleagues talking about criminalization and what that looks like in different places. So in the United States, there's a pretty unique contour. I'm sure it's shared across the world, but it's notable in that people imagine, especially with laws being passed in the US, what it looks like when somebody might be criminalized for an abortion. We imagine it intersects with all these things that are kind of big and nebulous in our mind, like surveillance capitalism. What does that mean? Or like ad words and ad data. And what is all that stuff floating around in the cloud? What's the cloud? But it seems that, at least in the US, we get some great data from our colleagues at an organization that helps with legal representation for people who have been criminalized for their abortion and miscarriage experiences, called If, When, How. And a vast majority of the way that cases come to the attention of law enforcement in the US is that, unfortunately, somebody who is either responsible for care for the patient or someone who knows the patient turns them in. So allegedly, you may go to a hospital. Often, if you take abortion pills, it can be the first time somebody experiences that, or you may be having a miscarriage that does not involve pills at all. The people go to the hospital and they try to be honest with their physician and tell them what they took. And this person, either another medical staffer, often a social worker at the hospital, doctor, nurse, may mistakenly believe that they are required to report the person to the police, or they may themselves have anti-abortion beliefs and stigma. And so that's a major way. The other one is somebody who knows the patient, a jilted partner, a parent, a neighbor, somebody in their life who does not agree with their decision. And unfortunately, in a plurality of these cases is the use of Google search history results to try and discern what someone's state of mind was. So the thing about a human body is, like, when a pregnancy ends, it's actually quite difficult forensically to tell whether or not somebody took abortion pills. There's new methods coming out forensically all the time, but generally speaking, in the United States, the method we use, it makes it really tough to tell if pills were involved. And so the human body, and I think this is a beautiful thing, is non-compliant with the letter of law. So it's quite difficult to kind of make it line up with sort of legal forensic standards. And so they go to your digital body and they criminalize and surveil, and especially, I would say, interrogate your digital form. And this is the person who was looking out for you. They were looking up where to get your pills. They have their search history, and because this is like with plain text, frame of mind information, that is what ends up going into a case, as well as messages you may send to somebody saying that you were either uncomfortable being pregnant, expressed a desire to end it. There's things like receipts for purchasing pills that might be in your email. And so, like, we kind of actually don't really need a ton of this, like, very abstract data that we're often thinking about and worried about, which we should be worried. Surveillance capitalism, still a big problem. But it's this stuff that's like the you that lives in your phone that is trying to act on your behalf ends up criminalizing these situations. And so big tech kind of, I think, hates the fact that they're, like, pointed out as being critical to this process. You would not have these criminalization cases the way you do if they didn't save all of your search history, and if they didn't, like, in some cases, like, if you send messages to somebody on a platform like Meta, it's totally unencrypted, and they have to turn that over. And so they sort of, when these cases come up in the news, they try to hide their responsibility and their involvement. And then I think rightfully, one of the biggest things that we can do is to tell people, like, this is how this works. And they aren't partial to the process of criminalization. They are critical. The fact that they choose to keep all of your data so that they can monetize it and sell it to give you ads, which we don't even really know work very well based on this information. And then basically they expose you to all this risk and all this danger. And, there's a particular case that came through where messages that were sent on Facebook Messenger were a big piece of that. Facebook is one of the many platforms that will often take down information on, like, legitimate medical information. Antis can use all of the, like, bad words that they want. And so when real information is censored off the internet, only they and their message kind of gets to remain. So here's this private message that's between, a parent and child in this case. And it's messages that I would say are very, like, loving, supportive, any relationship we would each hope to have with a parent. And those messages on Meta are become critical evidence in criminalizing this family. I have never in my life before actually seen Meta respond with their PR team to the outcry over the actual data that was turned over as part of a subpoena in this case. And I think as a result, that pressure was so shocking to them. So I would say, like, we're a nonprofit in the United States, and that means I can't lobby based on policies, but I can say whatever I want to tech companies. And I would say that a lot of what we try to help people understand is what this ecosystem looks like, and that you have the right to shout down. You have tech companies are made up of hundreds of thousands of employees. Many people in those companies actually do care very deeply about this stuff. Some of what we do is gather up information and feedback and research and all the media that's generated and create these packages. And I have a confession, which is that I used to work at a tech company a long time ago. So I know what the teams sound like. What is a search ads integrity team? I know what it is. And I can find who the director of it is and send them this stuff and get it circulated within internal employee ERGs, like groups that are for women at Google or something else. And then you have people on the inside who are like, what are we doing about this? Because they're all, a lot of people are very smart. They care a lot. They want to build products that don't hurt people. And I think getting that wonderful combination of the external pressure and the internal pressure is going to be critical to the next phase of how we make headway here. So I'm really grateful that in addition to all the support that we do at DDF, we also get to facilitate a lot of that process together as a community as well.
After having worked on abortion on an international level, the one thing that I've learned is that abortion is a very nuanced issue. And in different regions of the world, it's a different way to approach it. For example, in the US, it's about the law, it's about the government, it's about big tech. But let's take it a little back to Asia, to Southeast Asia, to Cambodia, where I'm based. It's a little bit different because we don't have a lot of issues with big tech. We don't have a lot of censorship because the machine learning, it doesn't detect the language. So it cannot detect a lot of the words there. I can get away with using the word vagina and then even boost it. It's fine. But you cannot do that in English. And I manage pages in different languages like English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Khmer. And I've noticed that the one language that is mostly restricted is Portuguese. Portuguese is so heavily restricted. Every time that I put any ad on it, it's mostly just rejected. But Khmer, not so much. Sometimes, but not so much. So the problem in Cambodia, the abortion is legal up to 12 weeks upon request. After that, there are some cases where you can still get it. I like to say that if you beg enough, you can still get it at any weeks. If you can beg enough, if you have enough money. But you didn't hear from me. The problem is we have social censorship. So I remember in a movie about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she said in one particular line that I remember to this day, she said, change mind first, then change the law. The problem in Cambodia is that we haven't changed the mind yet. And it goes a little bit back to 1970s when there was a genocide. And what happens when there's a genocide? It's kind of like how Trump is doing with the Department of Education, which is to get rid of the educated people first. That's your biggest barrier. Just get rid of educated people and then you can control the population, which was what happened during the genocide. So educated people, people who were resisting, people who were activists, people who were advocates, they were gotten rid of. And then what happens after the genocide was finished? What happened after the war was finished? We don't have any more of those people. We have people who are more compliant, people who have better survival instinct and they don't go to protest. And so because of that, it leaves generations after generations of people who are more compliant, people who, and I don't blame them because after the war, people were focused on survival. I mean, you need food. You don't go to protest. You need to bring food to the table first. But it causes this generational thing where when I grew up, I heard from the older generation saying, don't get involved in politics, don't go to protest. I have never been to a single march or protest in my life. And I just came back from Mexico City, and the moment that I landed in the airport, my colleagues were saying, hey, there are like 3 protests happening today. And I told them, yay, I want to go to one. I don't know what they're protesting about, but I kind of want to go to one. And one of my colleagues is French. And you know the French, they love their protests. So I'm always like, can I go to one of your protests? But yeah, we don't have people advocating for that. So although abortion is legal, a lot of people don't know that it's legal. So the law is there, but what happens when people don't even know that the law is there? Abortion pills is accessible in the pharmacy. You can buy it without any prescription. they don't even ask. You just tell them that you need abortion pills, they will give it to you. But I have talked to a lot of women and they don't know that. They don't know how to use it. So what happens is they go to unsafe method. They go to back alley abortion. And then there are also women who don't know where to get the information from. So they would post on Facebook groups. We still use Facebook, but they would post on Facebook groups saying, hey, I want to get an abortion. What should I do? That's when the stigmas come in, because other women or other people who are stigmatizing abortion, they would go and comment saying that, and I saw this post recently, this woman, she was pregnant and then her husband left her for another woman. And she said she doesn't want to carry the pregnancy to term anymore. So she posted asking, what should she do about this? And most of the comments were saying that, it's your baby. Why are you trying to kill your baby? So comments like that are in a way censoring abortion in itself, because then she would feel guilty. Abortion is legal, but at this point she feels a lot of pressure that she cannot actually go to get the access to it. So it's the same way as not having the law legalizing it at all if there are things like this happening. And then we also have the whole Christian evangelists coming into Cambodia as well. It's like, I like to call it modern day colonization, because like the other speakers have said, so they come into Cambodia under the guise of teaching English to underprivileged kids, giving them gifts. They have a lot of money. They give children gifts. They teach English. They go to villages. They assimilate. They learn Khmer. And then they talk about how beautiful it is to be in this culture. And then they start to spread their, whatever they're thinking. They started spreading anti-vax ideology, which never was there before in Cambodia. And then they were spreading anti-choice also ideology as well. I actually saw a video of an indigenous group in Cambodia praying to Jesus, indigenous group. And I was like, what is going on? Did they reach that far? And they do. So it's very nuanced, because for me, I think that in countries like Cambodia, we need to educate people to actually know, to actually understand choices, to understand bodily autonomy. Only then, when the people themselves feel empowered, when women themselves feel empowered that we can make the choices over our body, and then we can take it to another level where we can start advocating for it, for others, for on a legislative level and then on a global level. But we can't do that if we still like the boots on our neck and we don't want it off. I don't think that is gonna be able to change things. So unless we say that we don't want the boots on our neck anymore, that's when things start to change.
So we fly from Asia back to the United States over here, 14-hour flight. So I don't even know where to start in terms of how complicated like the digital abortion sort of landscape is within the United States and how many issues exist. So, a couple of examples include the manipulation of advertising results by, crisis pregnancy centers. So in the United States and via Google, there are a lot of abortion clinics who will advertise their services. So they come up first. So if you type in abortion pills, it'll be, one of the first ads that pops up. But the crisis pregnancy centers that exist will manipulate search results and say like, are you thinking about abortion? Learn about all your options here. And then, they'll try, they'll say, go to our website, and they'll say, come into one of our clinics so you can learn about all your options, or we can give you a free ultrasound, which are, often provided by people that aren't even like trained medical professionals. They're just people who got like an ultrasound machine because they're so well funded that they just have medical equipment that they can buy. So that's one issue, right? Is just being the top search result when people are actually looking for proper medical care. In terms of the limitation of abortion information just in like the social media ecosystem, TikTok and Reddit explicitly ban the advertisement of abortion services. And I find Reddit's policy quite interesting because they say that if you are a clinic that provides abortion services, you can advertise other services, just not abortion. And they say that in the policy, which I just find so interesting that they want to specify that. That's another example. And then in terms of abortion misinformation and disinformation, like this is not a US only problem, like this is all around the world. And it's shared by anti-abortion organizations, crisis pregnancy centers. And now in the United States, there's been the elimination of Meta's fact-checking program. And they're now moving to the community notes model, which is currently being used by, X/Twitter, whatever it's called, that guy's platform. So they're moving to the community notes model. And I know that I've heard from the repro rights movement in the United States that they're very worried about how this is going to be rolled out and what impact this could have on the dissemination of abortion information. I've seen horrible forms of abortion misinformation shared on these platforms, like posts that say there's no such thing as a medically necessary abortion. Abortion pills are the new coat hanger. And like, these are things that they do not take down, that have been reported. And they literally have notes on them saying like, it could be medical misinformation, but we're going to keep it up, right? So it's already like a lot of users don't have a lot of trust in how Meta handles and these companies handle abortion misinformation. And now with this new sort of model of fact checking or verification, whatever you want to call it, there are just serious fears about what could be shared when there's so much misinformation and online. But in terms of positive things in the United States, I think a lot of people are moving to a more local model of support and organizing. And we're realizing under the new administration, when there are so many challenges to so many different communities and so many different movements within the United States, that we really have to take care of, who's in our neighborhood and, who we know. And Repro Uncensored is now looking to work at the state level. So in Florida, for example, working with organizations there, and they're living under some of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. So working with them and making sure they know that we're there and we're there to help share information. And Repro Uncensored is also great because, the word abortion is not used in the title. So we know a lot of repro orgs that say like, this is actually great if we can kind of work under the umbrella of Repro Uncensored, because it won't be as much of a flag, because a lot of them have abortion like in the title of their organization. So they like the fact that it's Repro Uncensored and might not be as easily picked up by folks who are watching them. But continuing to organize at a more local level. And again, collecting evidence, as Martha stated, we're working with EFF to collect evidence of abortion information suppression online. And these are things we can use when speaking to these companies and leveraging in conversations that we have with the people making policies at these platforms. And just raising awareness of this issue. So
I'm truly terrified by all the things that's happening right now, and because I spent 8 years in Texas, so I'm just grateful that there are people like you out there working so hard to help change the situation. So as a person who really is not a tech savvy person, I can't even do my email sometimes. I'll provide a different kind of action or solutions to some of the problems that we talk about. I am an educator, I am a teacher, and I go talk to kids all the time of different ages. So I do think that when the digital world is so heavily twisted and censored and controlled by very powerful people, we still have the means of face-to-face communication. I think that is really precious, and that is what makes us human. And I know a lot of things are happening online. Like if your Google search doesn't give you some answers, sometimes you can't find the answers. So I still want us to keep this channel open, right? So we have this face-to-face interaction with people. And then I really agree with one of our panelists said that, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that change the mind and then change the law. But I do want to point out that in Taiwan, because we have people who have worked so hard to change the law first, like Youmei Wei Yuan here, really. So people like her and people that came before us worked so hard to change the law. So for example, Taiwan right now has the gender equality gender equality education law that mandates that all the mandatory education has to have gender equality education, and that's what protects us. Like when we go into school to talk to kids about that, even though the parents may oppose, the teacher may oppose, but we have the law on our backs, right? So they back us up, so we can say, well, we're here because the law says that we should be here to talk about this. So I do really appreciate that. And something I find very powerful, I'm a communication studies major and I study narratives, right? So narrative-based organizing is very effective when you're facing controversial topics like this. Give people your story. Your story, it doesn't work on everyone, but it does work on some level. So give narrative, tell your story, and that's very powerful. And one last thing I want to say is to be mindful of not falling into the framing, the agenda setting of your opponents. Right? For example, pro-abortion, pro-life, this is a classic debate, right? But just be very mindful when you're talking about something, use the framing that can really push your issue out, right? Don't try to fight other people's framing, just ignore their framing. Sometimes their framing they set the framing to trap you. So just ignore them, tell your story, have your framing, and I think that would be more effective. Thank you.
It was in 2019. There was a group of people in Taiwan. They tried to change a law, make abortion more difficult. According to current law, any pregnant woman under 24 weeks, they could go abortion legally. But those group of people, they try to have a referendum to make new law saying they only allowed 8 weeks pregnancy and in pregnancy under 8 weeks so that you could go abortion. And well, luckily they failed in the very early stage that this bill, we call it heartbeat bills, didn't go to the referendum, really a referendum stage. So that's what happened in Taiwan. Even I mentioned it was super easy to get all the informations and access to abortion pills or the birth control pills and everything.
One of the things that I really love having some of our previous giants in the room is that everything we do always is building on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. I think in the last month, especially, we've seen some incredibly stressful, but also depressing, monumental shifts in the world. But along with that, I'm also witnessing monumental support, strength that's coming from civic society, from everywhere. And that gives me a lot of hope. It's really stressful. Yes, everybody has funding issues. But I do think that this is the time that I think the partnerships, the democratic partnerships, the partnerships who are for the great value, that we will continue to stand together because we have to. And seeing everybody here in the room, I think we will. And I'm so thankful for that. And with that, I would like to open the room for Q&A.
I have 3 questions. Sorry. So I'm also a lawyer. I'm a friend of Loy. Thank you for inviting. So my first question is that among all these very horrible stories, have you found any platform that you found a little bit more friendly to this issue? The second question is that I happened to hear a story from an organization, activist friend of mine, that they use keyword SEO, keyword analyzing, to understand how their people who they help in need are searching in their website. And they found that they can't reach their people because they use wrong keywords. So have you find some fun facts or some keywords that we should use more to reach our public? The third question, so I had an abortion once, 11 years ago, and I realized that it's not only the pro-life people who are criticizing and stigmatizing you, but also my feminist friends. When they heard this story, they will say, did he know how harmful that is? And that is actually criticizing that person who ejaculated irresponsibly. But in my year, that here's like my body is broken, my life is broken, or something like that. So like, I really wish there will be some consensus that we don't use this kind of, let's say, microaggression or some words in the feminism community. So I really wish to hear your opinions about this. Thank you.
I think I was just going to repeat briefly. So good platforms, better SEO, and how can we combat stigma even among our own circles?
Okay, so I used to work in SEO for a very long time, technical SEO lead for a global corporate company. So that was my previous career. But in terms of finding out what people are searching for, yeah, I mean, hire a technical SEO person who does keyword research. There's loads of things you can do to find out what people are searching for. There's loads of tools out there. Also, if you're a big enough organization to have a Google AdWords account, you get access to the Google kind of AdWords search platform. You have to already be paying money to Google to have access to this. That's where you post the paid adverts. But if you are, an SEO person who has access to that, you can see how many people search for terms. So you can test out what people are searching for. And you can, you can see how many people are searching for how do I access an abortion, where do I find abortion pills? So you can find out like what are the popular terms.
I also want to add a little bit about the SEO as well. I'm not an SEO expert, but I really second what Ryan said about hiring an SEO expert, because we have, I think, a team. We have 3 SEO experts at WFD because it's a lot of work. And it's also related to Google algorithm as well, which is something that I'll be talking about tomorrow. So you can do everything, right? You can have all the keywords, all the best practices, but then when Google does an update, which affected us a lot. For example, in 2023, we did everything right. Our traffic was going up and all of that, and then suddenly Google did a core update. Everything just came crashing down. And then we had to scramble to find a way to fix it. And then they did another core update. So I think they did like 6 or 7 in 2023. So it's a constant game of catching up, of trying to find a better way to search for SEO, to do different ways to fix it, essentially. For example, sometimes we would think about website authority. Sometimes we would think about what better SEO keywords out there that we can use, what is trending, for example. So this is where an expert would really come in handy. But it's a very complicated, like what Ryan said. Regarding question number 1 about the platform, the other panelists can chime in if I'm wrong, but I feel like Reddit would be a good platform right now because it's not as censored as Meta. I mean, they were talking about ads, but we're talking about organic. In terms of organic reach, I feel like Reddit is a little less censored and it's more community-based, which is a double-edged sword, meaning that anyone can go comment in there, including anti-choice people. But it also means that you get a platform to comment or to raise awareness or to talk about your organization, to talk about your cause in there on Reddit as well. And I don't know, maybe if your story is interesting, you might end up on one of those TikTok with the AI voiceover video and Minecraft in the background, because that's how Reddit is blowing up right now because of all those videos. I watch it as well when I shower. I just keep it in the background, when I shower, when I'm doing some houseworks. But yeah.
I wanted to respond to the question 3 that you had. I worked a bit in India on ethical abortion storytelling, and I'm sorry you had to hear those judgmental remarks, and I don't think that's warranted or valid at all. But I would say that policing language is a slippery slope. And I think we have to, as a feminist movement, also realize how do we encourage accepting hearing all abortion experiences. I think, women or people who have abortion have diverse experiences around abortion, and how do we become more accepting of them and create and hold a space together where all experiences are welcome is more important, and not necessarily pass a judgment, or we may not agree with their experience or their perspective, but how do we still validate it? And how do we create that space to do that? So I do want to, reiterate that I think having a consensus on what kind of language may be a difficult process, but how do we become more welcoming of all experiences is something certainly we all can do collectively.
To your point about how often it's a very fragmented movement, and the way that we talk about it sometimes, even the fact that we have to pay to be able to rank higher on search on Google and makes us compete against each other is a problem, right? And then you have, obviously, as we said, all these fake clinics that have even more money. So it creates like this competition internally. And then also we compete for the same grants. So, it's just, I also want to highlight, I think that it also depends on the region. We often tell our partners in West Africa, I don't know, maybe Twitter is not the best anymore, but they a lot of countries really are there and have a highest, access to information through these platforms. TikTok is the same, So it's pretty obvious, but I think it also depends very much on the region and what people. And I think telling entire nations just change your platforms of communication because the ethics have changed maybe is not always the best approach. So
Did I hear we had a VPN question? Yes.
So because you were talking about how those messaging collected by Meta and whoever and then turn over to the police when there's an investigation. So service like VPN, does that help? Or incognito mode, or are there safer browsers to use for that to not happen?
So this is a really great question, I think, because it kind of highlights when we're asking about how to find an abortion more safely, it's sort of where do I start? And I think one of the things that's been really helpful is to then go back to the threat model or the risk model that we're looking at. So we talked about how cases come to the attention of law enforcement in the United States. It might be different in your country. And so trying to figure out how does that happen? And then what were the sort of initiating factors. We actually had a bit of an existential crisis about this. And that's why I like the VPN question at the Digital Defense Fund, because there are all these amazing tools. Some of them are at RightsCon tabling or, sharing in presentations. And I think they are great. I think they're also really essential to understand for organizations. Often we recommend some peers like the Electronic Frontier Foundation or EFF has their surveillance self-defense guide that I think digs into who you might be. Am I a journalist? Am I an activist? Am I a person looking for stuff online? If you are searching for products like a great browser or a great VPN, I'm going to give you one great tip to take home with you, which is that look for something that's called a transparency report on their webpage, or a privacy report, or a privacy disclosure, or a legal disclosure. You're looking for a page somewhere in any product's website, including a VPN, that says what kind of legal matters they have gotten involved in and what they've been forced to turn over. Because a product can claim it works any way it wants until it does one of two things, or both ideally, which is either open source its code so people who are experts can kind of take a look under the hood and see that it works the way they say it does, or they get sued and they're forced to prove under pain of law process that they actually do not keep, for example, a VPN does not keep your logs of where you visit. So I think no matter what you're looking for, whether it's a browser, whether it's a VPN, look for those transparency reports. Super essential tip for no matter what your kind of work is.
Please. I just quickly wanted to share the VPN, the Vagina Privacy Network. It's literally vaginaprivacynetwork.org, and it tells you, it's just a really basic guide for how to protect your privacy.
Thank you so much. This is my first time in Taipei. Really, just being here. I think even at RightsCon, we haven't yet been able to establish that feminist space. It's more hidden in pockets. So I'm really glad today in this room, in this pocket. I just wanted to comment on India as, with abortion access. So I was really relating to Catherine and what he was saying about Cambodia and disinformation. So I just remember when you were talking, we were also having a campaign. We work a lot on abortion access and disability justice. So on Twitter, X, whatever, tweeted something out. We have a lawyer who's a disabled woman on our team. And we were tweeting about the MTP Act, which is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1971. in India, right? That makes abortion partially legal under a medical practitioner who has to sign off on the abortion. We were tweeting about that, right? And then suddenly we get a reply from the PWD, the Person with Disabilities Board of Haryana. So they say that greetings of the day, you're doing good work, but abortion is illegal in India, right? So this really gross disinformation out there, right? So I was really relating to that. And when we talk about disabled women, when we talk about trans men, when we talk about queer people getting abortions, why are we not talking about particularly contraception and birth control and how they impact different kinds of bodies, right? How they impact a body with chronic illness, how they impact a body who's on HRT, hormone medicine, right? Why is it so vague? You know, among intersectionalities, why is disability only seen as an intersectionality? Why aren't we centering those movements, right? Disability as well as caste, because as you know, India is a Brahminical state country, and we have this wonderful leader called Modi, and who's also best friends with Trump. And so, you know, like on the get-go, like in the situation in India might seem more liberal, or we might seem like a democracy, but the far right is co-opting the movement, you know, like kind of like getting it on their side and then oppressing us in that way, in a regional way. This is my last point. In a regional way, like in Assam, there were also reports of how doulas, midwives, they engage in unsafe abortions by, you know, stamping the womb. And because that's in rural India, right, there's so much of disinformation related to abortion. In Kerala, for example, you don't have a ramp to the abortion clinic. Is only one kind of body supposed to get an abortion? So, you know, I'm actually very tired of being, again, the only disabled person. Why do I have to be the only person in the room to talk about disability, right? Just because I'm disabled. So I really hope that we kind of center disabled bodies as well. Yeah.
I just want to thank Nu for sharing that story. I think that was a wonderful story. And it's a reminder that abortion access is very intersectional. I think we should look at abortion not from and I know that the US is very powerful, so sometimes we look at it from a very US-centric, very Eurocentric lens, very heterosexual, very able-bodied centric. So we need to understand that abortion access is very, very intersectional. There are so many nuances to this. One example that I would say is it's very interesting how I did a content on contraception, and this was not even about abortion. And the argument against that was something that I didn't expect, but it made sense after I saw it. So the person commenting said that women shouldn't have access to contraception because if no one is giving birth, then the neighboring country will invade us. So we need women to give birth so that they will become soldiers. And if you cannot, I'm not even kidding. This person said, if you cannot afford to raise a child, send them to the border. So it's very nuanced because I've never heard this argument before. If you look at it from a very US-centric, from an EU-centric, you don't hear this. But then because Cambodia is a nationalist country, there you go, I couldn't say that word. So there are sentiments like that. There are intersectionality like that, like racism, for example. It also comes into play because suddenly it becomes this oppression of women because women just become baby-making machines where we can just pop out some soldiers, some labor for the capitalists, and we're no longer humans. And then it feeds into patriarchy, it feeds into capitalism. So it's very, very intersectional. And I think we need to remember that. Thank you.
I just want to start off by saying that I've had to pee for the last, I think, 5 minutes into the panel. And I was like, okay, there are 8 speakers. I'm sure I'd be able to, but all of you have been so amazing. This is by far one of the best sessions I'm sure I will attend for the rest of the conference. So thank you for putting this together. Okay. One reflection that I wanted to make is that I think to say, so it's actually it's not very known that the first IPPF clinic was actually in Bombay in the 1950s. And at that point, the state of SRHR was actually very supposedly progressive in India. And it all also came under the guise of family planning and population control. So I think I just, that kind of feeds into my question about also asking all of you, or any of you who would want to answer, that through your work, because you've also come at it from so many different perspectives and so many different spaces, what has been the most unlikeliest ally that you've come across? And the most unlikeliest ally, or perhaps the most unexpected discovery in your work, or this crazy creative strategy that somehow worked?
I have a weird one, which is that, we deal with all these different surveillance technologies that are now everywhere in the world. And one of the big ones is license plate readers. So I know they're here. I know they are pretty much in every country we're talking about, where a license plate reader is a type of camera attached to a AI-driven analysis platform that basically tracks everywhere cars drive. Some of them also collect facial recognition data. And so, in every country, there's this sort of existential crisis about public space. And the fact that we kind of release this data as we move through the world. Who gets to collect it? Who gets to resell it? When does the government get to use it against us? And it was kind of an interesting thing because I'm having a conversation with a colleague at EFF who works on this issue. And we were actually discussing that it's kind of hard to get legislators to understand what the problem is. This is public space. Who cares? But then when we described to them this sort of like threat model of a person who provides abortions, whether it's a physician or a midwife or somebody else, that ability that antis have to access, like tracking license plates outside of clinics in the United States is everywhere. People stand there with a notebook and pen and write it down. So we think about the automated license plate reader. We've had the non-automated license plate readers for a really long time. And we see that the danger that they pose to patients, to people who support them, and to, of course, doctors and other healthcare workers. So getting to describe that story, I love this, like talking about narrative. Suddenly we had this like quite bipartisan coalition of people in California, representatives who are like, actually, I think, we'll talk about a little more about when you can cover your license plate. Let's pass some policies around that. It didn't quite make it through yet, but I think it was a powerful example for me of how, when we have these nebulous things that occupy our world, surveillance technologies, sometimes bringing it back to bodily autonomy or whatever the narrative is for you that speaks to you about how you move through the world, can create these clear-cut examples that let us actually decide how we feel and form really strong emotional reactions.
I'll share 2 quick examples actually from India of unlikely allies and also maybe a creative media strategy. So this might be a bit dated, but when we started working on abortion in India, I think this was 2014, 2015. I don't know how many people remember BuzzFeed and the listicles they used to have. But we wanted to do a creative campaign on increasing awareness about abortion in India and about the law itself. And so we reached out to BuzzFeed and we were like, hey, would you like to do a listicle with us on 7 reasons or 8 reasons why people should know about abortion. And they very readily agreed. We didn't think that they would. It was a very popular platform with young people at that point. And it actually became one of the most popular listicles that year. So yeah, BuzzFeed, I used to love the quizzes, and it was an amazing way to engage with very mainstream audience. And in terms of unlikely allies, I would say actually, so I started an abortion story project while I was still based in India. And one of the first stories I collected on abortion was actually from my mother. It really opened up a space to actually talk to my own family. So my mom, my aunts, my cousins, friends who shared their abortion stories. And I think I really found unlikely allies there and a door open to actually have those conversations with them. And that's why I said, like, sometimes these conversations can start within the spaces that you are in. Doesn't have to be an activist space, but even within your own family. And that support has lasted all the way until now.
This is a blog topic, one of our most popular pages that I didn't expect would do so well. So it shows sometimes topics can be, you can experiment with different topics. So the topic is masturbation after abortion. We didn't expect it to do so well, but apparently a lot of people want to know about masturbation after abortion. So yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that you wouldn't, like, maybe Republicans in the US or, in different parties or you think have different systems of belief, but actually, there are a lot of them that are actually silent donors or have supported massive projects that we've done. They just don't want to maybe have the name out there. So it's maybe like a message to just encourage dialogue with other parties, and you never really know where the money comes from or where the support comes from. And we've done a bunch of campaigns, like with the MTA, a bunch of billboards in very restrictive states, whether in the US or worldwide. And a lot of support comes from people that you wouldn't really expect. When we worked in Dakar, for example, in Senegal, a lot of support came from people actually within the government.
Allyship, right? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in terms of allyship, I think it's very important to gather as many allies as possible. I know as a feminist, many people that I work with do not see men as ally, but I do see men as very, very important ally in many of these issues. And going back to my previous point, I think a lot of men or older women who are more conservative, I use this word because I don't have better words, they would say if you're pro-abortion, you're anti-babies, right? Why don't you love babies? You should love babies. So I want to make it very clear that, for me personally, I love babies. I want to have 3 or 5. It's because I can't, right? Medically, socially, legally, I can't have babies. But I love babies. But that doesn't take away the fact that I'm pro-abortion, I'm pro-choice. So I want to make it very clear that when we approach different kinds of possible allies, right? You should understand what they care about, and then you can frame your stories in a way that they understand. And I personally would never turn away somebody who might be an ally, right? Even though right now they may be on the fence or something, I always want to include more people. I think that's very, very important, especially men. So thank you for the men in the house, in the room right now for being here. But of course, we want to center women's experiences and women's story. But I do appreciate people who do not have that bodily experience to care about this issue.
Thank you so much, each and every one of you. Thank you so much for coming out here tonight. After tonight, I do urge you to look up every of their organization and their work. This is Ghost Item Media. Listen to us, find us on podcasts. Thank you so much. Can we take a big photo?
鬼岛之音
Ghost Island Media.